Hello, and thanks again for taking the time to check this out. This is our 12th After Effects title, Reproduction. This source graphic comes from the motion designer Aliyar Mikayilov, and there's a link in the description, so please go and check out that source graphic. It will roll in at about the 4-minute 50 mark after the link. So we have got this main titles going to arrive in with the double typography effect, and it has kind of like a slinky rhythm going on. Then the lower title is going to arrive in, but the symmetry of this one is quite different to the other ones we've done. There's no cloning to just reverse and animate everything out. Instead, the lower title graphics are going to rise up and mask out everything and end with just a little rotating flourish there. Right, so before we get into the project, if you want to make the same color gradient that I'm using in the background, which is just a gradient generator, these are the RGB settings. Okay then, let's jump into the project, see how this all comes together. The project is 1920 by 1080 and it's at 30 frames a second and it's 6 seconds long. So I'm just beginning the project with this gradient generator, like I mentioned before. It just has a similar color profile to the source graphic. So to start, let's add a group and name that group as the main titles, and then we'll add 2 more groups. I'll call this first group follow and this group lead, and then I'll select these groups and drag them into the main titles group. So we want to work with inside the lead group first, so select that, grab your line tool from the tools menu, and in the canvas hold shift and drag from left to right to draw a line in. Don't worry about the exact length, we'll set that very soon. Okay, I'll rename this as the lead stencil, and I'll come into the shape section and into geometry, and we'll give the 0.1 a value of -422 and 0.2 a value of 422. And then come into the style section and set the width at 164. And we can set the start cap and the end cap to none, and then come into properties and reset the X and Y position. Okay, so there's our banner that we're going to animate in and out. Make sure that is selected and come into the shape section, into the style section. Make sure your playhead's at the start of the project, and with the last point offset here, set a keyframe and drag the value down to 0%. Then come forward by 20 frames and set the value to 42%, and then come forward to 1 second and 5 frames and set the value to 100%. Then in the keyframe editor, let's drag to select the curve, right click, choose Bezier for the interpolation, and right clicking on these handles, we're going to break the tangent wherever we get the option to do that. Okay, I'll just fit these curves into the frame. Okay, so we want to grab this handle here and pull it down, and I'm holding the shift key so I can pull the handles straight. Let's pull the handle further this way so it runs very close to the bottom there, and we'll grab this handle and pull it in and have it running straight up and down, and this handle up. So having a look at this curve, we have this very steep section. So what will happen is our last point offset will animate in very slowly, and then as it hits this steep section around 20 frames, it's going to leap forward and then ease into place. Good, so now bring the playhead to 1 second and 6 frames, and select the first point offset and set a keyframe. And we'll give the first point offset a similar curve. So come to 1 second and 19 frames now, and set the first point offset value at 19, and then come to 2 seconds and 11 frames and bring it up all the way up to 100%. I'll just turn off the last point offset so I can select just these curves, and I'll right click and choose Bezier and do the breaking of the tangents with these handles. Right, and we'll give it a similar curve. Going to grab this handle, pull it down and across, and this one, and this one. So again, we get this steep section in the middle of the curve. I probably want this to be faster here, so let's see what we have now. Yep, okay, that looks good. So our banner stretches in and then whips out, and now we can add our titles. So select the lead group, select the text tool, and click into the canvas, and we can add our main title. I'm just going to choose the word motion. I'll come into the inspector and center the alignment. I'll set the font size to 150, and I'll set the font to heavy. As I mentioned before, there is a link in the description if you want to go and grab a copy of Unisans font. If you follow the link and scroll down, there's a download link. You can get a sample of the font for free. Okay, so we want to work with this title element now. Let's bring the playhead to 20 frames and come into the properties and drag the Y position up and just work out by eye that it's sitting in the middle of the banner there, and then set the X position with the playhead at 20 frames, set the X position to 350, and then set a keyframe there. And then bring the playhead to 2 seconds and 20 frames and set the X position to 0. Then we can come down and work with this curve. I'm going to select everything and break the tangents. And I want to pull this handle down and this handle down this way. So we get the, let's see if I can get more detail on this curve. Okay, so something like this, so the titles will rush in and then ease into place. Maybe just a little bit faster. Okay, that's good. So now we can get busy with the masking. So the first mask we'll do will give us the cutout part of the typography. So select the lead stencil shape, right click and choose Add Image Mask, and then drop in our title as the source and set the blend mode to Subtract. So now we have the cutout part. Now we want to give the clean typography to run alongside of it. So we do that by grabbing this lead stencil element, Command D to duplicate, delete the image mask. I'm going to rename it as follow and drag it into the follow group. Then I'll grab our title text and I'll Command D to duplicate that. I'll just add the word follow to kind of tag it, and I'll drag that into the follow group also, and I'll turn it on. Okay, so then select the follow group, right click and add image mask, and as the source we're going to use the lead stencil copy that we made minus the image mask. So drag that into the well there and set the blend mode to subtract. Good, so we have that double typography effect working well, but what's happening now is that this part of the title is visible where we don't want it to be, so bring the playhead to, around about here, anywhere where both copies of the text are within the banner, and select that title copy and hit I on the keyboard to trim it there. Okay, good. So the main part of the first stage of the animation is finished now. So next we can start the lower titles. So I'll just close this main titles group and I'll enter a new group and call that group the lower titles. And with that group selected, I'll grab the text tool. I'll bring the playhead to 1 second and 25 frames, and I'll select the text tool and click into the canvas and then enter lower title line. And I'll center the alignment, I'll give it a tracking of 8, and I'll come and change the font to regular. And the end point for this title is 1 second 25, so just making sure it's selected, I'll hit I on my keyboard to trim it there. And then we're going to come into properties, set the X position to 0 and set the Y position to -94. And set a keyframe. So our playhead's at 1 second 25 frames. The Y position on the lower title is -94 and we're setting a keyframe there. Then bring the playhead to 2 seconds and 25 frames and come into the inspector and drop this Y position to -171. And then in the keyframe editor, let's drag, select everything, break the tangents, and I'm going to drag this handle, pull it out this way and down, and this handle down and across. So the titles should drop quickly and then ease into position. Like that, that's good. So that is our lower title and main title done. So now we're going to introduce the key element of this title animation. I call it the riser line. So let's grab our line tool and somewhere under the motion title, hold shift and drag from right to left, about the same distance as that title, and then let go. I'm going to rename it as the riser, and then come into the shape section, into geometry, and just make sure that that first point is at 280, and then this point is at -280. And then come into properties and set the X position to 0, and you can set the Y position to -96. And then come into the shape, into the style section, and we'll give it a width of 10, and we'll set the start cap to none and the end cap to none. Okay, so then we want to bring the playhead to 1 second and 5 frames. Make sure that riser line is selected, and on the keyboard hit I to trim it there, and then we're going to animate the last point offset. So set a keyframe and drag the value down to 0. Bring the playhead forward to 2 seconds and 5 frames and bring that last point offset up to 100%. So now over 1 second that line will animate in. Okay, so let's select the curve. Right click, select Bezier and break the tangents on the handles. And let's drag this handle in this way and this handle in this way, so that not as serious as the curves we did in the beginning, but we get this slow, fast, slow effect. Now what we want to do is come to 1 second 25 frames, and 1 frame after, 1 frame before. That's worked out quite well. You want to make sure that the line is just about at the beginning of the title before this lower title line drops down, and that way the lower title line doesn't appear before the line has finished its journey. I want to get more of an exaggerated slow, fast, slow effect, so I'm going to drag this handle this way more and drag this handle this way more. Stretch, jump, stretch. Okay, so now I want to pull this handle even further this way to pull it back to right about there. That's what we want. Okay then, so the next step then is to animate this riser, which is going to then mask out every other element in the graphic. So we want to put some masks in now. Let's mask the lower title line first, so bring the playhead to 1 second 25 frames, select the lower titles group, come into the tools menu here and grab the rectangle tool and drag out a rectangle around the lower title. I'm going to rename it as the lower title mask, and I'll just drop it in the group to sit under the lower title line. I'll select the lower title line, right click, add image mask, and drag that rectangle shape in there as the source and set the blend mode to subtract. Then I'm going to select that mask source and come to behaviors, basic motion, align to, and then drag the riser in as the source for the align to behavior and set this chap here to bottom. Then bring the playhead to around about 1 second and 5 frames, where we can see the banner at full stretch. Select the main titles and just come and directly select the rectangle mask tool and drag a mask around everything here. And then select that mask, I'll rename it as the main title mask, and I'm going to add the same align to behavior. So behaviors, basic motion, align to, and I'll set the riser as the source again, and I'll set this one here to bottom. Okay, so now bring the playhead to 3 seconds and 25 frames. So now we're going to start to animate this riser line to rise up and spin out, and along the way it's going to mask out everything else. But the first thing we want to do is create a new curve group, so make sure the riser line is selected. Come down here into the keyframe editor menu and choose new curve group. Just give it a name. So in there already we've got the last point offset. Let's come into the inspector shape, style, drag the first point offset in there, and then come into properties and drag the rotation Z position in there, and come into properties again and drag the Y position in there. So we're going to start with the playhead at 3 seconds 25 frames. We want to focus on the Y position first, so I'm going to turn off everything else and set a keyframe for the Y position. I'll just check my notes before I go any further. So we want to bring the playhead to 4 seconds and 10 frames. And set that Y position now to -47, and then bring the playhead to 5 seconds and 5 frames, and set that Y position to 108. Alright, so let's start adjusting the curve. Drag to select everything, and okay, we're set to Bezier already, good, and then we want to break the tangents. Okay, now we're going to give it that slow, fast, slow curve. So drag this handle this way, and this handle this way, and this handle this way, and this handle this way. So now our riser line will rise up and mask out the main title, but we want that main title to gently dip into that animation. So let's come select the main title group and bring the playhead to 4 seconds. Come into the inspector, and with the main title group selected, set a keyframe for the Y position. Come forward to 5 seconds in the timeline and set that Y position value to -50, and then change the group to animated so we can see the keyframe, so we can see the curve here. Let's drag to select and break tangents, and we want the main titles to drop down slowly, so let's pull this handle this way first, and then this handle this way, and just play with it till I get it right. Okay, I think that'll do just fine. So we have the riser is masking out the main title, and now we want to do the same for the lower title line, and this is a tricky thing to do. Let's bring our playhead back to 3 seconds and 22 frames. Just in keeping with the After Effects source graphic that we're reproducing, this is the point where the lower title line starts to animate out. So let's grab that lower title line, set a keyframe for the Y position, bring the playhead forward to 4 seconds and 10 frames. No, sorry, bring the playhead forward to 4 seconds and 14 frames, which is right where the riser has finished masking out the main title. So at this point we want the lower title line to be masked out as well. So we want to grab the Y position and drag it up so that by this point the lower title has disappeared too. And dragging the Y position up has given us this curve. So what we need to do now is match the curve to fit with the path of the riser so that the lower title line follows behind and gradually gets more and more masked out until it reaches the top here and is completely masked out. To get the best idea about what I'm talking about, do go to the link in the description and check out the source graphic to see what we want. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get prepared in advance, and I'm going to come back to you when everything's ready to show you. Otherwise you would be watching me here tweak and try and tweak and try, and it would just be really boring for you. So I'll see you back here shortly. Okay, so as you see, I have been adjusting and tweaking this curve, and what I'll do, I'll tap through frame by frame to show you what we've done. So the lower title line will start to follow the riser, and it's finally around here, it's gone right up into its mask, which is also following the riser. And what I'll do now is at frame 4 seconds and 14 frames, I'm going to hit O on the keyboard to just trim that title element right out. So just going frame by frame, it doesn't look so clean, but moving at full speed, it looks alright. To really know what we're trying to achieve here, you'd have to go and check out the source graphic at that link, which comes in at about 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So as far as this After Effects reproduction goes, this is something that I haven't really been able to do that well, which is all part of the learning curve. But before we go any further, let's look at the alternative to keyframing, which will probably give us an even better looking result. Let's bring the playhead forward to that 4 second and 14 frame mark and delete that keyframe point. So now the lower title is back to where it was, and bring the playhead to 3 seconds 22 frames and make sure the lower title is selected. Come and grab the behaviors and go basic motion and select that align to behavior again. But this time we're not going to use the riser as the source. We're going to set that lower title mask shape in as the source. And with the playhead at 3 seconds 22 frames and that align to behavior selected, hit I on the keyboard to trim it there. So it kicks in at 3 seconds 22 frames, and you see that our title has just jumped up into its mask, which it has been aligned to. But what we want to do is come into the inspector here, and where it says transition, let's change the setting to ease in. And so now if I tap forward frame by frame, the lower title line is going to start to align more and more to its mask, which itself is aligned to the riser line. So by this point, it's completely masked out. And in this situation, I think in this case, using the align to behavior has given us a cleaner looking result than trying to keyframe it. Alright, so there we go. Let's stay with the align to behavior and move on to the next steps. So I'm going to come into the keyframe editor, come back to that riser group, bring the playhead to 5 seconds and 5 frames. So the riser line has reached the summit of its climb, and now we want it to rotate and contract out. So that's going to start at 5 seconds and 8 frames. So let's bring the playhead to 5 seconds and 8 frames, come into our parameter group here, and we can turn off Y. We're not going to use it. We want to play with Z the first point and last point offset. So set a keyframe for each of these here, and then bring the playhead to 5 seconds and 28 frames. Now set the Z rotation from 0 to 90, and set the first point offset to 50% and the last point offset to 50%. Right, and you see that we've rotated the line which has rotated the mask, and it's revealing our main titles again. So to fix that, let's just go back to the 5 second mark and grab the main titles and hit O on the keyboard to trim them out. Okay, we won't see them again, so let's bring the playhead back to the 5 second and 8 frame mark. And now we can start working with these keyframes here. Right, so we're going to do a similar thing with the slow, fast, slow. Let's work first with the rotation curve. So I'm going to turn off the offset curves, so we just have this rotation curve. Let's bring the playhead forward to 5 seconds and 15 frames. Grab that rotation curve, right click, select Bezier, break the tangents on the handles. Right, so we're going to pull this handle down flat and pull this handle over. And what we want to do is, see, I'm using the playhead line here as a point to judge from. We want the that steep part of the curve to be sitting right here. I want it to be based around this 5 second and 15 frame mark. So now the handle is going to rotate slowly and then flip quickly after that point. And so we want now to adjust the curves of the last point and first point offset to pretty much do the same thing. So let's turn off the Z rotation, turn the last point offset, first point offset on. I'm going to drag to select them all, right click, select interpolation, Bezier, break the handles one by one. If anyone knows a faster way to just break all the tangents on all the handles faster than selecting them just one by one, please shout out, let me know. I'd love to know about that. Right, so now we can work with these curves. So I'm going to grab, group selected these curves here. I'm going to hold the shift key on my keyboard and drag to select them. It should straighten them all out. I'm going to pull them forward. I'll bring that playhead to that 5 second and 15 frame mark. So we've got something to, a good reference point here. I'll grab these handles and drag them out. So we're getting that, we want to have that steep part of the curve sitting around where our playhead is meeting. That's a bit too far forward. How about bring them forward this way? Alright, so if I turn the Z rotation on, okay, let's see how that looks. So there it is, that's our 12th After Effects title graphics reproduction in Motion 5. Some parts of this graphic for me were really hard to reproduce, but I'm going to keep working on this and see if I can improve on it. It's been a really long guide this time, so sorry about that, but it's definitely some interesting things that we picked up and learned, especially using the align to behavior as a really good substitute for keyframing. Thank you for coming to check this out. I hope it's useful for your motion projects and your Final Cut projects.